Welcome back to The Explainer, where we dive into some of history's most incredible stories. Today, we're talking about a military campaign so bold, so brilliantly executed, it honestly seems impossible.
All right, let's jump right into part 4 of our series on Khalid ibn al-Walid, one of the greatest generals to ever live. And just a reminder, all of this is based on the fantastic historical analysis of Dr. Roy Casagranda.
Before we get into the details, I just want you to look at these numbers. 150,000 against 15,000. These are the odds Khalid will eventually face at the peak of his invasion of Iraq. So how on earth could an army this small not just survive, but win a total, crushing victory? Well, the answer is found in this series of battles that are absolute masterclasses in strategy.
Okay, so our story kicks off in 632 AD, right after the death of the Prophet Muhammad. Now, you got to understand, Arabia had never, not once in its history, been a single unified country. And this is a huge deal, because without a stable home base, launching an invasion is pretty much impossible. But that was all about to change.
The new leader, the Caliph Abu Bakr, sends out 2 armies to finally bring the whole peninsula under one banner. Khalid gets command of the one heading east, and through just this whirlwind of victories, he does something nobody had ever managed to do before. In less than a year, all of Arabia is unified. This creates the solid foundation he needs for his next and way more ambitious campaign.
And here's where it gets wild. With Arabia united, Khalid doesn't even pause for a breath. He just keeps going. Historians still argue about whether he actually had orders for this, but either way, he pushes his army north, straight into the lands of a superpower, the mighty Persian Empire.
So he gets to what is modern-day Kuwait, and he faces his first real test against the Persians. And this isn't some local militia, right? This is the professional army of an empire that's been around for 1,200 years. And they're up against an army from a nation that's barely a year old.
The Persian general Hormuz came up with this really bizarre but intimidating tactic. No, I'm not kidding. He had his best soldiers literally chained together at the ankles. The idea was, 1, to show the Arabs their unbreakable resolve. We're not retreating. And 2, to form a solid human wall that Khalid's famous cavalry charges couldn't possibly break. So on paper, you've got Khalid's 18,000 men facing off against 20,000 Persians. Seems pretty even, right? But the numbers don't tell the real story here. Khalid's force is all about speed, movement, and flexibility. The Persians, on the other hand, had deliberately made themselves into a giant, static, unmoving wall.
So here's the play-by-play of how Khalid just completely took this formation apart. First, the traditional pre-battle poetry starts up. The Persians just ignore it. Okay, so Khalid himself rides out and challenges the general, Hormuz, to single combat. Hormuz pretty much has to accept or he'll look like a coward. Big mistake. Khalid takes him out in about 30 seconds. Boom! The Persians are now leaderless. That's when Khalid unleashes his cavalry in these quick, harassing charges, not to break the line, but to just keep them off balance. Because they're chained up, they can't really reposition. Finally, once they're in total disarray, he swings his forces around the flanks and just tears them to pieces.
After a string of victories, the Persians are getting seriously angry. They decide to stop messing around. They assemble not 1, not 2, but 3 separate massive armies, and they're all converging on Khalid's position to crush him once and for all.
Yep, a total of 60,000 Persian soldiers are marching toward him. But they weren't one big group. They were split into 3 armies of 20,000 each, and the plan was to surround and overwhelm him.
And what does Khalid have to face them? Just 15,000 exhausted men who've already been fighting a grueling campaign. He's outnumbered 4 to 1. He knows, he absolutely knows, that if those 3 armies manage to link up, it is game over.
Khalid understood his only chance was to hit them one by one. And the plan he came up with is something that sounds like it's straight out of a movie. It's so audacious, it should have failed. He splits his tiny army into 3 even smaller groups, gives them a rendezvous point weeks in advance where he predicts the first Persian army will be camped, and tells them all to get there at the exact same moment, 2 a.m., using 3 totally different routes.
To put that into perspective, Dr. Casagranda makes this great point. He says, I challenge you, grab 2 friends, get in 3 separate cars, use GPS, and just try to arrive at the same destination at the exact same second. Bet you can't do it. Now imagine trying to do that in the 7th century with no GPS, no watches, traveling at night in enemy territory. It's an absolutely insane logistical feat.
And yet, they did it.
The 3 units converged at the exact moment, fell upon the sleeping Persian camp, and completely wiped them out. Then he looks at his men and says, "All right, 2 to go." And they did it again. And then a 3rd time. It is easily one of the most brilliant maneuvers in military history. He took out 60,000 soldiers in 3 successive night attacks with almost no losses.
These humiliating defeats finally forced the Persians to admit they couldn't handle Khalid alone. They needed help. So for the next major battle, the Battle of Fuz, they turned to their oldest, greatest enemy for help.
For almost 7 centuries, the Romans and the Persians have been the 2 superpowers of the known world, and they spent most of that time trying to destroy each other. But this new, unexpected threat coming out of the desert was so alarming that they did the unthinkable. They teamed up. They formed a massive super army to put an end to Khalid for good.
And the odds were just staggering. At the Battle of Fuz, Khalid's 15,000 men were now up against a combined force of 150,000. That is 10 to 1. It should have been a slaughter.
So what do?
Well, if you're Khalid, you turn the enemy's greatest strength, their numbers, into their biggest weakness. He actually pulls his army away from the Euphrates River, basically inviting them to cross. He waits patiently until about 50,000 of them are on his side, and then, bam! The trap is sprung. His hidden units rush out and seize the bridge and the ford, cutting them off completely. Then, Khalid starts charging into them, but not just to kill them. He charges, backs up, and charges again. He's literally compacting them, squishing them so tightly together that they can't even lift their arms to fight. The moment they realize they're trapped, it's just pure panic, a catastrophic stampede.
The results are, well, they're just astonishing. 50,000 soldiers from the alliance were killed, crushed in the stampede or cut down. And Khalid's losses? Only about 200 men.
And just like that, the war was essentially over. The entire conquest of Iraq was complete. The sheer speed and decisiveness of the whole campaign were just staggering. In a matter of months, the military presence of the 2 oldest, most powerful empires on Earth had been completely dismantled in that region.
Through pure strategic genius, in logistics, in psychology, and battlefield tactics, Khalid pulled off what nobody thought was even remotely possible. He outfought and outfought armies that dwarfed his own. And in less than a year, Iraq belonged to the Caliphate. Hey, if you enjoyed this breakdown of military strategy and history, please do us a huge favor and support the channel by liking this explainer and subscribing to Spotwork Learning for more deep dives just like this one.
But the fight is far from over. After conquering a huge chunk of one empire's territory, Khalid is immediately ordered to march to Syria to take on the other superpower. Join us for Part 5 to see what happens when he faces the full, undivided attention of the Roman army. Trust me, you are not going to want to miss it.